What is going on, everyone? Thanks for joining the Azure Academy. Today we are going to build the best multi-cloud VPN between Azure and AWS, and we're starting right now.
I'm Dean Safola, and this is the Azure Academy.
Now, we have covered a lot on VPNs on this channel already, but this one is unique because we're going to connect Azure with AWS. And that means that we may have some people who are unfamiliar with either side of those two clouds. So we're going to show everything in detail today. And if you look below the video in the description section, you'll find I've got a resources link that goes out to the Azure documentation, and that covers everything step by step for your future reference. And that documentation was written by a teammate of mine, Ricardo Martins, and I've got his LinkedIn in the description below as well. So be sure to follow him and thank him for writing up this entire solution that we're going to walk through today. So why would you want to have a multi-cloud VPN? Well, you could use it for daily operations because you're just in a multi-cloud setup in your company. Or maybe you want to migrate from one cloud to the other. So for that, you'd need some kind of connectivity between them, and that's where a VPN can come in. VPNs are also great for encrypting traffic between two different locations. So no matter what your scenario, we're going to get it done for you today. So why is this going to be the very best VPN that you could build? Well, you could have built a VPN on top of virtual machines in either Azure or AWS for a few years now. Just build an Ubuntu server and install something like OpenVPN server, and you've been good to go. But the problem with a single VM like that just cannot scale out or scale up. They're not made that way, but an appliance can. And so today we're going to be leveraging the Azure Virtual Network Gateway. It is a managed scalable appliance, which means that with a click of a button, you can double your amount of bandwidth, throughput, and scale the system to accommodate whatever your needs are. So you can make this a point-to-site VPN, and it supports a bunch of different clients, from the Azure native client to OpenVPN, as we've done videos on in the past. Or a site-to-site VPN like we're going to do today to connect two different locations. You could also connect your on-prem with the cloud in this same way. This same gateway appliance is also what Azure Express Route could be built on top of. So we've got a lot of different options in this managed service. And that means that we need to fulfill some requirements. One of being that we need an Azure subscription and an AWS account, as well as a virtual network and a VPC, so that we have something to connect our VPNs to, and then we'll need some VMs for testing. So let's go over to the Azure portal and get started. Now, as with all of our videos, you'll see down in the YouTube timeline here that there are different chapter sections so that you can jump around if you're already familiar with how to do this process. But if this is your very first time using Azure, you'll want to go to azure.microsoft.com and then click the Try Azure for Free button over there. And then you'll see up here you can start for free or buy now. So if you start for free, basically you get 12 months of Azure with $200 a month as Azure credits. But of course, if you already have an Azure subscription, then you can just go to portal.azure.com and sign in. So when you click Start for Free, you'll be seeing this screen, and then you can sign in if you already have a login. If not, then you can go right there to create one. Now, I'm going to skip through this part of the process and let you do that on your own if you need to, and I'll just sign in. Now, in Azure, once you have signed in, at the very top, you'll want to search for resource groups. Now, if you already have your resource group that you want to use and you've already got a pre-existing virtual network, then you can skip ahead to the next chapter. Everything in Azure needs to be stored within a resource group, which is basically a metadata container. So let's create for ourselves a new resource group, and we'll just do that by clicking the new plus there. And then every resource group needs to be stored in a subscription. So go ahead and select your appropriate subscription, and then your resource group needs a name. We'll call this one RG for resource group -Azure-AWS. And then we'll store that in a particular region. In this case, I'll choose East US because that's near where I am. Then go ahead and click Next. And this is where we can add some tags. This is additional metadata that we can add to our resource group so that we can do other stuff with it later. For example, some automation tasks, or where we can add additional information like what application this is related to, what our environment is, who owns it, what the cost code is, all that kind of good stuff. When you've added all of your appropriate tags, go ahead and click the Next Review button. Then Azure will validate that everything looks good, and then go ahead and click Create. Now this should only take a couple seconds to build this resource group, and then we can build our first resource. Go ahead and click the Go to Resource button that shows up, and now we are inside our resource group. So all of the resources we're going to build on the Azure side are going to live in this resource group. And we're going to start with building a virtual network. So at the top, go ahead and click Add, and then you'll type in virtual network into the marketplace. Go ahead and select that and then hit Create. Give your virtual network a name and choose an appropriate region. And generally you want to keep these resources as close to yourself as possible so you have the best latency experience. So I'll call my virtual network VNet-Azure, and I'll store that in the East US and click Next for our IP addresses. Every virtual network has boundaries, and those are the IP address ranges that you select. A VNet can have multiple IP address ranges. In this case, we just need one IP address range, and I'll make that 172.10.0.0/16. Now we need to add a new subnet into our address space so we have some room to work. Go ahead and click to add a new subnet. And then over here, we need to give the subnet a name and a IP address range. This is how large your subnet is. So this subnet range, of course, needs to be within the address space of the entire virtual network. So I'll just call this subnet-01, and I'll make the IP address range 172.10.1.0/24. And we don't need any of these services at this point, so go ahead and click Add. Now let's hit Next. And this is the security section. We don't need to add any of these items right now, but of course you can always go back and do that at a later time. So let's click Next again, add some appropriate tags for this network, and then go ahead and click the Review and Create button. Azure will once again validate that everything you've done looks good, and go ahead and create. And that'll be done in just a moment, and then click the Go to Resource button, and there is our virtual network. So at the top, you can see our IP address range that we selected, and go to subnets over there on the left, and you can see your subnet range as well. Let's go back to our resource group because now we're going to build our VPN gateway. Let's go ahead and click the Add button, type in Virtual Network Gateway, select that, and then hit the Create button. We'll call this one VPN-Azure-AWS. Choose your appropriate region. I'll choose East US. And then there's that toggle for either a VPN gateway or an express route gateway. In this case, we want VPN. And then you can choose which type of VPN you want, policy or route-based. We're going to choose route-based today. And then we have our SKUs. This is the capacity and bandwidth that your VPN would have. And when I click the drop down for the SKUs, you can see we've got numbers 1 through 5, and then again 1 through 5 with an AZ. The difference between the two is the first 1 through 5 have to do with building inside one availability zone, and the others are spread across multiple availability zones. That means you get a little more high availability in case something happened to one of the zones in Azure. Your VPN would still be able to be up. So for the moment here, I'm just going to select VPN Gateway 3 with an availability zone, just because I'm going to show you this next feature, and that is the generation. And the docs will go into this in more detail, but generation 2 systems have more bandwidth, throughput, features, etc. than generation 1 features. So if those are important to you, then you'll want to be sure to select something that's in generation 2. Just for today's example, however, I'm going to choose VPN Gateway 1, which is restricted to generation 1, because I just don't need a lot of bandwidth for this example. And then the next dropdown is for our virtual network, and you'll want to select the network that you just created. And when you do that, it should automatically select the first IP address space, and that would be that 172.10 space that we selected. But notice it's got a /24, not a /16. That's because Azure is smart enough to know that we created a subnet already at 172.10.1. 1.0/24. So it knows that that first /24 is available for us to build our gateway subnet, which is a requirement for the gateway appliance. So it's already done that for us. Now, the next thing is we need a public IP address. And that's so our VPN has something to talk to the world with. If you have an existing public IP, go ahead and select that. Otherwise, you can just type in the name of your new public IP. And just to make sure I can find it later and know that it's associated with this VPN, I'll call it PIP for public IP address -VPN -Azure -AWS. And if we scroll down, the next thing we have to choose is if we want our VPN gateway to be active-active or active-passive. Now, active-active means that you can have more simultaneous connections. And by the way, active-active does not cost any more than active-passive. It's simply your preference. Now, in my case, I don't need it to be active-active. It's just my lab, and this is just an example. If you need more bandwidth, reliability, high availability, etc., go ahead and select enabled for that, but I'm going to leave mine disabled today. And then we have configuring BGP. Now, BGP, for those who don't know, is the Border Gateway Protocol, and this is something that gives us a lot more flexibility and intelligence for how things are going to be routed and accepted or blocked on our network. For today's example, because we're connecting Azure to AWS, I'm not going to enable BGP, but if you're creating a site-to-site VPN for your on-prem network and your on-prem appliance supports BGP, then you can go ahead and enable that. But I'm going to leave it disabled today and go ahead and click next and add my tags. And because these resources are all related to the same project, I'm adding the same tags just to keep everything uniform, and then go ahead and hit next. Azure has once again validated that everything we did was good, and go ahead and hit create. Now, the VPN gateway will take a little while to build, so while it's doing that, let's jump over to AWS. And just like before, if you already have an AWS account, feel free to skip ahead in the chapters. But for those of you who are new to AWS, you'll want to go to aws.amazon.com, and then over here in the top corner, you want to select complete sign up, and then on the sign in screen, go ahead and click over there where it says create a new AWS account, and go ahead and fill out the form, or if you have an existing account, go ahead and click the sign in. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the rest of this sign in process just like before on Azure, so let's log in to my AWS account and get started. And now that we're logged into the AWS Management Console, we want to go to the search box at the very top and just type VPC. And then go ahead and click that first entry. And now in the first box for VPCs, we want to click on that. And then over here, we want to click on Create VPC. And we need to give it a name, so I'll call it my-VPC-01. And then we need an IP address range. And I'll make this 10.10.0.0/16. For our IPv6 block, we'll just leave that set to no, and our tenancy will be default. And then you can add some tags. And when you've done with that, go ahead and click Create VPC. And now we need to create a subnet. So over on the left, go ahead and click Subnets, and then up top here, click Create Subnet. And from the drop-down over there, go ahead and select the appropriate VPC, should be the one you just created. And I'll call this my-subnet-01. And then for my availability zone, I'll go ahead and select US East 1A. And then the CIDR range for our subnet will be 10.10.1.0/24. And then add your tags, and go ahead and click the Create button. Now we're going to create a customer gateway. This is what's going to point to the public IP address of our VPN in Azure. So go ahead and scroll down over on the left, and there you'll find your virtual private network, and in there choose Customer Gateway. And then at the top, go ahead and hit Create. So we need to give it a name, so CG-AWS-Azure. And then for the IP address, we have to go back to the Azure portal real quick and grab that public IP. And back in the Azure portal, there is our public IP address. We'll go ahead and click that. And then up top, there is the public IP. So we'll copy that and go back to AWS and just paste that in the IP address field. And then go ahead and click Create Customer Gateway. Once that's done, you can hit close, and there is our gateway. And now on the left, just under that, we want to select our virtual private gateway. This is what's going to complete that connection. So click on Create Virtual Private Gateway, and then we need a name. How about VPG-AWS-Azure? Then for our ASN, we'll just leave it as Amazon default and then hit Create. Once that's done, hit Close, and now we need to attach our virtual private gateway to the VPC. So go ahead and right-click on it and select Attach to VPC. In the drop-down, select the ID of your VPC and click Attach. And now over on the left, we want to go to the site-to-site VPN connections and go ahead and click Create VPN Connection. We're almost there. Once again, we need a name, VPN-AWS-Azure, and then for our gateway type, choose Virtual Private Gateway. Under our Virtual Private Gateway drop-down menu, go ahead and select the ID of the appropriate gateway, the one we just created. And then we want this to be an existing gateway. And again, choose the right one from the drop-down. For your routing options, we're going to choose static, and the static IP address range is going to be the range from Azure. So this is 172.10.1.0/24. The tunnel version will be for IPv4. And then at the bottom, go ahead and hit Create. Once that's done, at the top here, you can click Download Configuration. And for your vendor, choose Generic. Platform should also be generic, and then the software should be vendor agnostic, and then hit the download button. And that configuration file is going to have the pre-shared key and the public key for each of the 2 IPsec tunnels that AWS just created. Now this file also contains the virtual private gateway information, but you can see that in the AWS portal. Here in the site-to-site VPN configuration, go ahead and click over there on tunnel details. And there you can see the tunnel's public IP addresses as well as the status. Currently, it's down. So how can we fix that? We need to go back to Azure. And what we need to do is add a local network gateway. Now the purpose of that is usually to see what your on-prem IP address range is, but in this case, it's going to be what our AWS IP address range is, so the 2 networks can complete the connection. So at the top, go ahead and click Add, and then in the search box, type Local Network Gateway, select that from the drop-down, and then go ahead and hit the Create button. And surprisingly enough, we'll call this LNG-Azure-AWS. Our endpoint will be a IP address, and then we need to know which IP we're going to use. So back to the AWS Management Console, and I'll just copy the IP address from the very first tunnel and back to Azure, and then paste that in the IP address field. And now we need an IP address range. This is going to be that CIDR block from our VPC. So put in here 10.10.0.0/16. At the bottom, make sure that your subscription and resource group are correct, and for your region, this does need to be in the same region as the virtual network gateway and your virtual network so that they can all communicate together, and hit the Create button. And in just a minute, you'll have your local network gateway, and now we need to finish the whole process with a VPN connection. So go ahead and click on the virtual network gateway, and then way over there on the left, you've got connections, and at the top, click Add, and we'll call this Connection-Azure-AWS. Change your connection type from VNet to VNet and select Site to Site IPsec. The virtual network gateway has already been selected for us, but go ahead and choose your local network gateway. And remember, that's the LNG-Azure-AWS. And now we need the shared key from the first tunnel, and that's in the downloaded configuration file. And the only other setting you need to verify for sure is that IKE v2 is selected, and then go ahead and hit OK, and that'll establish your connection. And in just a few minutes of some handshaking, you will see in your virtual network gateway that you are now connected, and we can go back to AWS and verify this by looking at our site-to-site connections tunnel details, and you can see our first tunnel there is showing a status of up. Now we need to add a route to send our traffic from AWS to Azure. So if we scroll all the way up to the top, And then over there on the left, you want to select your route tables. Right click on your route and then go ahead and select Edit Routes. Now over there, go ahead and click the Add Route button, and you want to type in that Azure IP address range. And then for your target, go ahead and hit the drop down, and at the very bottom, select the Virtual Private Gateway, and that'll list all of the VPGs that you have and select the appropriate one. In our case, we just have one. And to finish, go ahead and hit Save Routes. Now you do have a secondary tunnel that we do want to set up a connection for as well, and it'll be the same process as we just did. So we'll go through this one a little faster. Back in the Azure portal, go ahead and click Add and type in that local network gateway again and select it, and then hit Create. We'll call this one LNG-Azure-AWS-Standby, and for our IP address, you guessed it, back to AWS. And we'll scroll all the way down on the left, click on the site-to-site VPN connections, copy the IP address from our second tunnel and back to Azure. Paste that in the IP address field, and then the address space will be our VPC's CIDR block. Verify again that you have the right subscription, resource group, and region. Hit Create. Okay, almost done. Let's go back to the virtual network gateway, and on the left again, choose your connections, and at the top, hit Add Connection. And our name's going to be connection-azure-aws-standby. Our connection type will be site-to-site IPsec again. The virtual network gateway has already been selected, so select your local network gateway, choose our LNG-standby, and now we need our second pre-shared key from our configuration. Make sure that IKE v2 is selected, and hit OK. And in just a few minutes of the old handshake, we've got another good connection, and we can verify that back in AWS that both tunnels are now up. Now, since virtual machines in AWS do not get access to the internet by default, we need to create an internet gateway in order to do the testing. So over on the left, scroll back up to the top, and then go ahead and click the Internet Gateway. And then up here, go ahead and click Create, and we'll call it the My-Internet-Gateway. And then I've added my tags, and then hit Create. And then up here, click the Actions button and select Attach to VPC. And click in the box, select your VPC's ID, and then click Attach Internet Gateway. All right, great job everyone. We've got a working VPN. We just need to test it. So we need a virtual machine on both sides in order to verify that the tunnel is working. So we're gonna go up to the very top left and click on Services. And then right underneath all services, we have Compute, and you want to click on EC2. And then right over there, you want to click on the Launch Instance button. And because I'm in a free AWS subscription, I'm going to click over there in the filter for the free tier only, but you can obviously do this with any VM that you want. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to go with the Ubuntu Server version 20 and then hit Select. And the T2 Micro free tier enabled has already been selected for me, and I'm going to click that configuration button over here and just verify that the network and subnet that you've got selected are the ones that are actually attached to our VPN solution. And then all the other settings are good for me today, so I'm just going to hit this Review and Launch button. So everything looks good to me, and I'm going to hit the Launch button. You're going to need to create a new key pair. So in the first box, I'll select Create a New Key Pair, and then you just give it a name. And I'll just call it VPN-key pair, and then click this Download Key Pair button. Now, be careful because this is your only opportunity to get this key pair, so be sure that you save it. And when you've done that, click Launch Instance. Now, while that's going through and finishing, let's jump back to Azure and build a VM over there. And back in the same resource group we've been doing everything else, go ahead and click Add at the top. And since we built an Ubuntu VM in AWS, let's build that first Windows server over here in Azure. We'll give it a name and a region. Because we only have one VM on the Azure side for this test, we don't need the availability options. Our image has already been selected as Server 2016. So we'll scroll down, and our VM size has already been selected with 2 CPU cores and 8 gigs of RAM. I think that's just fine for a quick test like this. Then we'll enter our credentials. Now, of course, there's many more settings that we could get into, but I'm just gonna hit the Review and Create button since this is just a quick test. Our validation has passed, and hit Create. And in just a minute or so, our VM is done building. Now, what we have right over here is our private IP address that's on our subnet where our VPN is located, and then we have a public IP address, and we're going to use that to connect over RDP to this Windows VM. And you can do that real easy just by clicking the connect button at the top. And since this is a Windows system, click RDP and then hit the button over there to download your RDP file. And once you've opened that, just go ahead and hit connect. Now I'm going to use PuTTY in order to SSH over to my AWS virtual machine. So that's already installed over there. And you can see that I've got my PIM file as well that I've downloaded from AWS. And I've already converted that with PuTTYgen into a .ppk file. Now remember, we don't have an inbound IP address on our EC2 instance, so the only way we connect to it is over the VPN tunnel. So I'm going to go with my user at the private IP address of that EC2 instance, and we'll just click open. And there we go, we're connected to 10.10.1.112, and I've loaded that side by side with the Windows command prompt, and you can see our private IP address over there is 172.10.1.4. And let's ping that from the AWS side. And there you go, active ping response. The VPN tunnel is up and it is working. Now, of course, you can add plenty of enhancements from here. So you can do DNS resolution across or even Active Directory authentication and build yourself your enterprise across your multi-cloud VPN. So thanks for joining us today on this first venture into the multi-cloud world. I don't know if we'll do a whole lot of these, depends on your feedback. It was certainly a great experience for me to learn all that I did on the AWS side of things. So give me some comments down below if you are using multi-cloud, how you do it, what you do, and what you're interested in a future video here at the Azure Academy. Don't forget to click subscribe, like, comment, share, all of that good stuff. And if you want to see more stuff on Azure networking, I've got my playlist right over there so you can keep on learning, as well as the latest video at the Azure Academy. Thanks very much for joining us for today's video, and we will catch you next week. Happy learning.